Now, this might sound kind of harsh, but probably not very controversial. I think audio companies are not very good when it comes to software, which is why when it comes to digital audio players, I prefer the Android-based ones, like this one, because you can then customize it and you can kind of make the software experience how you want, or at least how I want. But of course, there are some Android-based audio players that don't give you those same customization options, and I feel like those ones are not very competitive. Well, hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan. This is Super Review, and today we're taking a look at the Shanling M3 Plus, which is Shanling's newest DAP that is a replacement to the M3 Ultra, and I know that's kind of confusing, like usually Ultra comes after Plus, at least that's what Apple taught me, but Shanling's not Apple, and here we have the Plus, which is their newest. Now, in terms of their lineup of Android-based digital audio players, the M3 series has kind of been Shanling's entry level, and that's what this is still. It still comes in under $500. I think the price is $470, unless you buy it in the US, in which case it's $480. But it's still $470 with US dollars outside of the US. It's a little kind of confusing, but that is the price, and that is the tariff situation that we've got going on here. But yeah, for 470 bucks, what do you get? What are the new headline features on this new Shanling M3 Plus? Well, the player now has 4 Cirrus Logic DACs built inside of it, and it's got power output up to 800 milliwatts of power at 32 ohms, which is frankly a lot of power. So if you're looking for a lot of power and a lot of DACs built into a digital audio player, they've got you. But I'm just gonna say right now, this is one of those audio players I was talking about that's kind of limited in terms of its customizability, but exactly how does it impact the user experience? Well, in this review, that's what we're gonna talk about. But before we get to that stuff, a quick shout out to Shanling for sending in the M3 Plus for review. If you wanna check it out, I will of course have them linked in the description down below. And with that said, let's go back to the table and we're gonna talk about what comes inside the box, talk about the build quality, physical form factor on this audio player, some quirks, some features, and then of course we're going to talk about what this thing is really like to use. We'll talk about the sound, although I'll warn you, I don't talk a ton about sound quality. There are some things that are important to talk about, but also kind of a lot of things that are not important to talk about. But in terms of the user experience, I want to spend a lot of time talking about that. And then I also want to bring in a couple of other audio players that I feel like are maybe more competitive than this one. But I digress. Let's talk about the build quality. And just to start with, this is something that Shanling does a fantastic job of. I think that when it comes to build quality on their audio players, they're doing some of the most impressive, just kind of highest end looking stuff. And the M3 Plus that we have here, again, a sub $500 audio player that looks this gorgeous. I dig it. I really like the color. It's kind of like this mocha brown. I don't know how much it's going to come across in color. Screen colors are always different. Camera colors are different. I'm looking at it here on my screen, and it looks a little bit more rosy to me in person than it does in my video camera. But again, what does it look like to you? I don't know exactly. But I will say that it is, I think, a very handsome, kind of mature looking color that you don't see often on an audio player. Now, in terms of build materials, it's quite nice. You have aluminum rails all the way around the sides. On the top, you do have, well, it feels like a frosted glass, as well as on the bottom a frosted glass. And then also on the back, you have kind of that same, okay, it's not maybe quite frosted, but it is a little bit on the matte side. So I like that. You know, a lot of these audio players and just phones in general, they go with the glass back to have better like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth performance rather than having it be all metal. The downside with glass is that I feel like glass just ends up feeling a little bit fragile, but also when it's really slick, it'll literally fall off my couch and stuff when I put it down. But this finish here doesn't have that issue, which I appreciate. I would still like something maybe a little bit more softer touch, but you know, it is what it is. Apart from that, anything to talk about the physical form factor? Actually, yeah, I did want to say something. Okay, so I like that it has like these wrinkles and these dimples in it. Like it feels nice in the hand. It feels kind of dimensional and premium in a kind of like a Stellan Kern way. But it has another quality about it that is also reminiscent of a Stellan Kern, which if you're not familiar, they make really expensive digital audio players. But it's something I don't like, and it's that these corners are quite sharp. So in the hand, this thing is actually uncomfortable to use. Obviously, you can, I guess, avoid it by just don't let these corners touch your palm because it does hurt. Or the other solution is that you can throw on a case. Now, it doesn't come with this carry case inside the box, which is a little bit of a disappointment, but it is pretty cheap. It's about 15 bucks to buy one of these things. And as far as carry cases or these little protective cases go, I like this one more than usual because you can see there are cutouts for the buttons over here on the left, cutouts for the knob, And that's great. A lot of these things will cover up the buttons, and then it just kind of ruins your tactile experience with them. But this one doesn't. I think they did a good job with that case. Again, just kind of a bit of a disappointment that it doesn't come with the player. And then it's also just a little bit of a disappointment because this thing does otherwise look so beautiful that I kind of hate to throw a case on it. I guess I am realizing now I didn't really talk about what comes inside the box because frankly, there's not a ton inside the box. This is the box. It's a handsome, fine little box, I suppose. It does come with a screen protector built in on the device, but it is like a plastic screen protector. Usually those things I remove, but if you do want to add a replacement, it does also come with a replacement screen protector. But again, it's one of those plastic types, which I'm personally not a fan of. It just ruins the feel of touching the screen, at least for me. And then it does also come with a charging cable, which is USB-C on one end, USB-A on the other end. And that is all you get inside the box. Again, the little protective case is something that you buy separately, but 15 bucks. So, okay, anything else to talk about build quality before we get into the nitty gritty? I don't think so. So let's talk about the screen. For context, this is a 4.7-inch screen. I'm looking around me to see if I have something else to give you. Hold on real quick. I'm gonna grab a Pixel 4 XL for scale, which I know is not like the most relevant phone for scale, but just to give you an idea, this is like a 6-point-something-inch screen. It's a pretty big screen, to be honest. But if you're used to like a modern smartphone, this thing is still fairly compact. 4.7 inches. It's not the most compact audio player out there, but I think this is a pretty good size in terms of a balance between being nice and compact and also just making, giving you a lot of real estate to see your UI. I think in terms of screen quality, this thing's actually pretty good. It's a 720p screen, which I know doesn't sound super impressive, but generally I found the colors to be quite nice. In fact, let me go into, I suppose, Spotify, and we'll show you what things look like, right? Yeah, like the color cast on it's generally good. Contrast and stuff is pretty good. Like a lot of these things, like viewing it from an angle is not 100% great. Like you can see, it gets a little bit brighter at that angle and gets a little bit dimmer at that angle. But for most use, I actually think that this is a pretty nice screen, and which is not always the case with these things, to be honest. Now, in terms of the buttons on this audio player, and again, I feel like I say this every time, but people ask me, like, why do you even bother getting a standalone music player in 2025 rather than just using your phone? And for me, a big part of it, honestly, is the buttons. I like having physical tactile buttons to use. So for me, the buttons are actually really, really important. And I think the button layout on this thing is actually quite nice. So they go with the knob design, which has a couple of interesting side effects. The main one is just that it ends up looking really clean and simple, right? The knob basically takes care of what would normally be 3 separate buttons on another audio player that doesn't have a knob. And that means that the only UI that you have is over here on the left side, which is a play pause button, a previous track button, and a next track button. And it's just kind of laid out nice and simple. And again, I really do just kind of love the simplicity of it. Over here on the other side is where we have that knob, and I'm still of mixed opinions when it comes to knobs on digital audio players. I feel like it is an interesting trade-off in that the knob just ends up being a little bit of a hindrance. If you put an audio player inside your pocket, right, there's more chance that you're going to accidentally change volume as you put this thing in and out of your pocket. But I think that Shanling generally does the best job of it because as you can see, the knob here is actually quite low profile, right? It doesn't stick out much past the edge of the device. In fact, it kind of coincides with these swoopy bits here. So that even takes a little bit more off of how much it sticks out. But they do that without it having kind of the problem of some other knobs where they feel like too recessed or like kind of too big of a pain in the butt to use. Like this is generally like you got pretty nice range on this thing with one kind of continuous thumb swipe. And I know that feels like that maybe that should just be kind of a simple given, but it's not with these audio players. Like this is a very well executed one. The other stuff that I think is quite nice about this is that there's not a lot of like wobble or play in the knob, which maybe you would expect because it is quite low profile, but it does also click in, as you can see. So the 3 buttons that this thing is taking care of is volume up, volume down, and then the power on off function, all handled by one very handsome looking knob. So I dig that much about it. Okay, apart from the buttons and the controls, the other stuff to talk about the physical form factor is going to be the I/O, like the inputs and the outputs. Down here in the bottom is where you have your USB-C as well as your micro SD card slot. I believe this does support up to 2 terabytes of memory on the SD card if you want. I personally use just 128 gigs. That's all I need. But then up here on the top is where you have your audio jacks, and you do of course have a balanced 4.4 mil as well as a single-ended 3.5 mil. And here's where I'm going to start complaining again about the same thing I always complain about with audio players that have jacks on the top. Is I think audio jacks just make more sense on the bottom. And again, I did a survey of my audience about this a couple of years ago. Maybe I should redo it. But I asked people, what do you prefer? Do you prefer the audio jacks on the top of your unit or the bottom? And it kind of depends on, I guess, on how people are used to putting their phone in their pocket, because everybody wants the jack to just point toward the top of the pocket. So if you're listening to headphones and just go straight in, right? Some people put their phone in their pocket differently than I do, which is interesting, but it turns out only about 30% of people prefer to have headphone jacks on the top like this, and the rest of them, about 60 to 70% of people prefer headphone jacks on the bottom like I do. But again, maybe it's a limited sample size, and it's nice to have something for the jacks on top people. All right, you've got an option. But I guess I'm curious, for if you're watching this now, leave a comment. Let me know where do you prefer your audio jacks? But anyway, so yeah, that's a small complaint, but there you go. So let's dive in now more into the functionality, what it's like to live with this player. And I want to start just by talking about some of the specs on it. So I've already mentioned it's Android. I haven't yet mentioned that it is Android 13, which is a nice, relatively modern version of Android. It's not the most modern. If you're expecting to buy a device like this and then get the latest version of Android with updates on this thing, I wouldn't expect that. This thing's probably going to be always on Android 13. There might be security updates. I don't know that Shanling is necessarily the best about firmware updates. More on that later, but yeah, just it's Android 13. And I don't necessarily think that's a big problem for me personally, because Android 13 is going to be compatible with all of the apps and softwares I use. In fact, the main audio player I use is this one, which is on Android 8.1, and it literally does everything that I need. So personally, I'm not too worried about compatibilities and stuff like that. If you're worried about security, I guess, I don't know, I don't do anything that secure on my digital audio player that I'm concerned about it personally. But yeah, just note that it is Android 13. I don't know, the latest version is probably like Android 16, maybe even 17, coming out pretty soon. In terms of the hardware specs on this thing, the processor is a Snapdragon 665, which is pretty in line with what we've been seeing on digital audio players for the last few years. And generally, I find the 675 or the 665 chip to be sufficient, right? If you're running apps like Spotify, and I'll show you what this looks like real quick. Actually, let me just do a full cold launch, right? We'll just close everything, and I'll show you what it looks like to launch Spotify from cold. This is one of the more difficult to run apps when it comes to streaming music apps, and you can see that the 665 does a pretty good job. There's some chunking on it, but generally I'm pretty happy with the performance on this thing. That said, it's nothing like standout. These chips are being used in pretty much every digital audio player these days. The one thing that is a little bit standout on this one is that it does come with 4 gigabytes of RAM. Most of these audio players have 2, maybe 3 gigabytes of RAM. And this one does have 4 gigabytes, which just means that as you're launching and switching between different apps, you're less likely to have an app be closed in the background or something like that. For me, like I just used the music streaming apps, or mostly I just use PowerAmp, to be honest. So I don't really run into this as a limitation when I use other audio players. But if you do, well, this one's got an extra gigabyte of RAM, which might help. Okay. Now I want to dive into more of the customizability. And this is where I've already alluded to the fact that this thing, it's got some problems. It's got some limitations when it comes to customizability. It does have some good stuff though, which I guess I'll highlight. And that is that, well, for starters, it's got the Google Play Store, which means you can go into the Google Play Store, search for pretty much any app because it is Android 13, and you can download it, install it, and run your own apps the way you want to for kind of the most part, but well, here's why it's not actually the most part. There's some annoying limitations that Shanling puts on this player, and it's not just this player. It seems like it's every Shanling player that I've tried in recent years has these limitations, and it kind of makes me not want to use these players anymore. if I'm perfectly honest. So problem number one is you can't customize the launcher, all right? So you are stuck with this launcher. Usually I like to go to a launcher called Niagara Launcher. It's just a nice, simple launcher that doesn't have a bunch of icons on my home screen. Like there's nothing I can do about these icons. I mean, I can avoid that screen, I suppose, if I want to, but there's just always gonna be icons piling up on your home screen, and there's nothing you can do about it because you cannot customize the launcher on a Shanling player, including this M3 Plus. So that's pretty annoying. Some other things that are kind of annoying, it doesn't support app pinning. So if you're not familiar with app pinning, I guess I'll show you over here on this player that does support app pinning. This is a audiophile M21. When I use an audio player like this, I don't want to type in a security code to unlock the screen every time, right? I might put this thing down, pick it up an hour later. I want to change my music. I don't want to type in my password. With app pinning, you don't have to. The only way that you would need to type in your password is if I want to get past this app. If I want to stop using this app, then like I swipe up and hold, goes back to my lock screen, and then I enter my password to get past it. That's app pinning. And I think it's a really kind of crucial function for an Android-based digital audio player that unfortunately the M3 Plus just doesn't have. There's no app pinning. It won't let you do it, which is frankly kind of disappointing. What else are some issues that I had with it? So these aren't so much necessarily limitations, or I don't know, these are kind of like some weird software experience bugs. I don't know what we'll call it, but I want to demonstrate for you exactly what I'm talking about. So again, I like to use PowerAmp, and yes, you can install PowerAmp, you can listen to PowerAmp, you're not stuck to using the stock Shanling Music app, which is good because, well, I'll show you what the stock music app does, and it's okay, but I don't love it. So you can use PowerAmp, but you might run into a problem that I ran into early. Thankfully, there's a fix, but you might nonetheless run into this problem, and I think I'll be able to demonstrate it for you. So I'm going to launch PowerAmp, and you might notice down here at the bottom, in fact, let me zoom in there, it says Audio Engine failed to load. In fact, let me reboot this app just to show you what that does, because it does it every time. And basically, until you fix it, PowerAmp will not play, right? If I hit play, I don't know what it's doing, but it's not playing my music because the Audio Engine failed to load. In fact, now I can't pause my music, so I have to force close the app. We're going to relaunch it, and I'll show you how to fix this. If you're dealing with this for yourself, go into PowerAmp, go into the menu for PowerAmp, go to Settings, go to Audio, go down to Output here at the bottom, and to some degree, this is like PowerAmp's fault. PowerAmp tries way too hard with its audio output settings, but by default, it will be in this OpenSLES output mode. And this is not compatible with the Shanling. I don't know why. I don't usually have this issue with other audio players, but it's not compatible. So click into instead this one, Audio Track Output, which is, I guess, the default Android Audio API. And where it says next to the wired headset aux, just check that. Now you've basically switched the audio output mode for PowerAmp. And if I go back, I'm going to reopen the app. You'll notice I don't get that error. In fact, it goes back to the last track I was actually playing in PowerAmp, which was not the Romeo and Juliet soundtrack. Although that is kind of a cool soundtrack, by the way. Shout outs 90s kids. But anyway, so that's a bit of a limitation there that I ran into. Again, I solved it. Not a big deal. But there's a bigger issue that I'm probably not going to be able to reproduce for you right now that I'll try to edit in a clip later. But when I am listening to music on this device, and then maybe I pause it and I come back like an hour later, and then I go back, launch into my music player, and this seems to happen whether it's PowerAmp or the stock music app, the M3 Plus is doing something where it's like unmounting my SD card or something in the background, because I'll launch into PowerAmp. It'll basically tell me the music files aren't there. And then about 5-10 seconds later, then it's like, oh wait, never mind. Here's the music files. And then it'll start playing them. And this might seem like a pretty minor point. And to be honest, to some degree, it is a minor point. Like, okay, I have to wait 5 to 10 seconds in order to start playing music after I haven't used the device for about an hour or so. But it's nonetheless pretty annoying. And it's not something I have to deal with on other Android-based audio players. So for me, it's just kind of an annoyance. Another thing that's kind of makes using this audio player, frankly, not very pleasant. Now, you can, again, just use the stock music app. And as I launch this, I'm going to show you something that this stock music app does that kind of annoys me, which is it just keeps resetting itself to defaulting to this stock Shanling track, like this stock, I don't know, it's like it just says like the artist is Shanling, and then apparently the title of the song is their slogan. I don't know why it keeps defaulting to this, right? This was not the last thing I was listening to when I use this app, but nonetheless, it just keeps returning here. Now, of course, again, maybe a minor point, maybe a minor annoyance, but I want to show you a couple of things that are the real reasons I don't like using this app. And to be fair, like these things are true for almost all built-in softwares that come in on these Android players, whether they're from Shanling or from File or from Hibby. They all kind of make the same mistakes, which is why I personally like to customize the players and use PowerAmp instead. But let me show you the issues, just to show that nobody's listening to me, which is fine. But if I go into artists, right? So I have all of the artists on my player. I'll punch in here so you can see. I hate that they customize. I'm going to go to the Cs, and the Cure does not appear in the Cs. I have the Cure on this thing. I have multiple albums by them, but they're not there. In fact, to find the Cure, I have to go to the Ts, where all of the artists that start with the are organized. And I feel like this is just the wrong way to organize your music library. The other thing that I don't like, which is kind of related to this, in fact, see, even this isn't alphabetical, right? It goes the Japanese, the J, the K, H-I-J-K, M. Okay, this is alphabetical. But then I still haven't found the Cure. Oh, there's the C's. We're back at the C's, the Cardigans, the C's, the Cure. Okay, I don't know why this is not even in alphabetical order. I didn't notice that until just now. But another thing that I find annoying is that something I like to do, and maybe this is just a me thing, but I like to listen to an artist, and I want to listen to all of their albums in order. Is that rare? Is that random? Because none of these audio players do that, which feels like kind of basic functionality for me. But let me show you what it does. What that looks like here on the Shanling is, if I want to listen to all of the songs by this artist, I can click here and go to View All, and it's just going to lay out all of the songs in alphabetical order, which is, again, not the order I want to listen to them. I want to listen to them in the order of the albums. I want to listen to the album after album on loop, but I can't do that with this app, which again is not so much a big deal because I just go into PowerAmp. PowerAmp does it, but PowerAmp has its own issues, which I showed you earlier. So I don't know. It all just goes to show that the UX, the experience on this player is Android. It's customizable, but it's very limited in ways that most Android players are not. It's more customizable than Estelle and Kern players, so I'll give them that. But goddamn, this thing it's really kind of frustrating and disappointing to use. So there is that. Other things to talk about in terms of software functionality is system-wide EQ. Let me show you what the system-wide EQ looks like. Just kidding. There is no system-wide EQ on this device. The only options you have, you can like change DAC filters, which okay. You can also switch between 2 DACs and 4 DACs if you want to listen to 2 DACs or 4 DACs. Basically, the difference is one will drain your battery faster, and yep, the number goes up to 4. So some people are into that. Like, I get it. I just am not that kind of person that cares about that difference. I would love system-wide EQ. Unfortunately, there is no system-wide EQ on this. In fact, I probably should have. I didn't test, because you can go into the Android App Store, download an app called like PowerAmp. PowerAmp has their own system-wide EQ feature. I'm kind of curious. Again, I should have tested this. I'll leave it in the pinned comment below, I guess. I'll figure it out after this video. Does that work? Because given some of the other issues I had with the PowerAmp music player, there's a chance it doesn't work, which would be, again, doubly disappointing. But anyway, so there is that. But now let's talk about some other usability stuff like the battery life. The battery on this device is a 3,500 milliamp hour battery, which is not that large, but it's basically the same battery size that was in the M3 Ultra, the previous version of the M3. Disappointingly, however, the battery life has gone down from about 20 hours estimated on the M3 Ultra down to about 15 hours. Actually, they claim 14 hours on single-ended, or 11 hours if you use the balanced output. So again, this is just like This trend of prioritizing having 4 DACs and 800 milliwatts of output power over having battery life, which I understand for a lot of people, look, this is just my personal opinion. For some people, that is the right trade-off. For me, that is the wrong trade-off. And I'm going to have to complain about it, I suppose, every time. So yeah, the older M3 Ultra, it's got the same battery, but it's got 50% more battery life because it does it with, I guess, fewer than 4 DACs. But I guess, I don't know, ultimately, is it all worth it for the sound quality? Well, let's talk about the sound quality. I've already alluded to the fact that there are 4 DACs in here. If you're curious which ones they are Cirrus Logic CS43198, which is, I'm gonna say right now, that is a nice DAC. That is if I see a 43198 listed on a product, my expectations going into that is it's gonna sound nice. Is it gonna sound better than most? No, it's probably gonna sound about as good as most, because most of these things all kind of sound the same. But that's good to see. It's good to see the Cirrus Logics. And again, you can, if you want to, toggle on between 2 and 4 DACs, which I'm going to say right now, it does not make things sound better. When you toggle it on, the audio will kind of blip out momentarily for, let's call it half second, 500 milliseconds, and then it comes back. And to me, it sounds exactly the same. If you can hear the difference, I would love to see somebody doing a blind listening test. Just have your friend hold the DAP in their hand, you listen to it, just have them like kind of randomly hammer the button, stop somewhere, and then you tell them if it's in 2 DAC or 4 DAC mode. I want to see someone do that, because I'll tell you right now, I cannot hear the difference. Now, in terms of power output, we'll go through some of the specs on this thing. On the single-ended, they have 200 milliwatts of output power, which is nice. That's actually pretty good power output on single-ended. But on balance, it gets even more. It goes up to 800 milliwatts of power. Also, output specs-wise, they have the ratings on the output impedance, which is nice. I appreciate that Shanling usually provides those specs. On the 3.5 mil connector, it is below 1 ohm of output impedance, which is exactly what I like to see. What that means is just that if you plug in a sensitive earphone, output impedance can sometimes shift the frequency response of a headphone. If you're using like, I don't know, a headphone like this, you're not going to hear the difference between 0 and 1 ohms of output impedance. But if you're using a really sensitive IEM, I don't know, maybe something like this, you might actually hear a difference. It might get bassier, it might get brighter, it might just get weird. It kind of depends on the IEM that you're using, but it can shift it. So having low output impedance is super important. However, on the balance connector, and this is pretty common, the output impedance is higher. They say that it's under 1.5, or they call it about 1.5 ohms. So it's about double the output impedance on the 4.4 mil, which is again, pretty normal and still not gonna be enough that most people are gonna ever encounter an issue. But if you are using a really sensitive earphone and you're really particular about it, you might. So just note about that. In terms of noise floor performance, which is, again, another sound quality thing that I think is actually a lot more noticeable than things like total harmonic distortion. Distortion can be very audible if it's really loud, but most things get distortion down to a point that I can't hear the differences. But noise floor, which is like hissing, background like white noise, that I can very much hear. And on this player, it does a really good job of that. Like on the 3.5 mil connector, I would say that the hiss is very low. And on the 4.4 mil, I would say that it is low. Not quite as low as it over here, but for all intents and purposes, you are not going to hear any hissing on this audio player unless you are trying to, which is what I'm usually trying to do when I'm testing these things, but I don't really care. Yeah, I'm perfectly happy with the noise floor performance on this thing. And then finally, we'll talk about driving power. I mean, I've already given you the specs. It can support up to 200 milliwatts of output power on single-ended, 800 milliwatts on balance, which is kind of the headline feature. And can this thing drive a pair of Sennheiser HD600s, full-size, over-ear, 300 ohm headphones? The answer is yeah, very, very easily. Like, you don't actually need... These things will get plenty loud on about 12 milliwatts of output power, okay? So do you need 800 milliwatts of output power? I don't know. Look, I did some testing with this with the most difficult to drive headphones that I have, which would be, I guess, you know, some people's benchmark, the HD600. It's not actually that hard to drive. Another benchmark would be the Dan Clark Audio E3, quite a bit less sensitive than the HD600. Still, on 3.5 mil, on low gain, I get them more than loud enough to hear. like louder than I want to hear, right? It's uncomfortable to listen to the DCA E3 on this, on low gain, on 3.5 mil at max volume. And then the last thing I tested was also, I have the Headphone 2 GT, which is even more hard to drive. And I will say that on single-ended, low gain at max volume was about where I want to listen to it. I could see maybe wanting to make it a little bit louder, but it wasn't too loud. But all of that was on low gain single-ended. And if you want to know, like, the power output of low gain single-ended is 12.5 milliwatts of power. 12.5 milliwatts of power. That's all I need to drive basically all of my headphones. Now, having more headroom than that is nice to have, because if you are going to use EQ, again, there's no built-in EQ in this, okay, but if you are going to use EQ, that will kind of like start to drop how much audio you have. Or I don't know, maybe it just kind of feels nice as an audiophile to have a little bit of headroom, a little bit of wiggle room, so that you're not pressing, you're not pushing your amplifiers to 100% in order to get the volume levels that you want to listen to. Okay, and also some room for, like, there's some quiet music. Some music is just recorded quieter, and you actually need more output gain in order to get it louder. Some people just listen louder than I do, which is fine. But again, for me, 12.5 milliwatts of power is plenty. This thing makes a lot of sacrifices to give you 800 milliwatts of power. Ask yourself, is that necessary? Because this is a question I keep asking myself when I look at these audio players. Okay, that's probably enough harping on this thing. I did want to bring in some other audio players briefly, just to kind of give you a sense of some other options that I would personally consider. So of course we've got the M3 Plus over here. Here we've got the Hibi R5 Gen 2. This is a very old player at this point. It's actually using a really old processor as well, but it's also an Android-based audio player. And this is the audiophile M21 that I showed you earlier. This one's pretty new. Neither of these devices have any of the software restrictions that I ran into on this guy. So it means I can customize these exactly the way that I want, even though this one is on Android 8.1. I think this is Android 13 as well, something like that. It's a semi-modern version, but this is really old Android, and it's still more customizable than this one, which is really sad. Now, in terms of price, the M21 is actually the cheapest here on the table by quite a bit. It's only 330 bucks, which is kind of a steal. In terms of power output, it can do 950 milliwatts of power. There's some asterisks there because you have to have it plugged into a wall, but basically, suffice to say, this thing can output way more power than you need. But again, if you just need a big number on there to make you feel better about it, this can do that for less money without the customization limitations. Battery life is about the same. They claim about 15 hours, pretty close to what I got. And it does also have system-wide EQ. So for me, the reasons why I would pick the M21 is if you want system-wide EQ, you want to run apps like Spotify, and you don't want to spend more than 330 bucks, because frankly, I don't think there's a very good reason to. The other option here is the R5 Gen 2, which is actually the player I personally use the most. It is an older player. It's got an older processor. If you need to use Spotify, I don't really recommend this. It's not very good at running the Spotify app. But if you just need to use Power Amp, it's perfectly fine. You can see that processor-wise, it has no issues with running this thing. Now, in terms of other stuff, price is about 350 bucks now. The max power output is only 475 milliwatts of power. But the trade-off is that the battery life on this player is incredible. I get about 35 hours of battery on the Hibi R5 Gen 2, which is, if you're counting, more than double the battery life that we're getting on these other players. So if you bought both of these, charge them to full, listen to them back to back, the battery would still be dead before the Hibi is, which, there you go. It also has system-wide EQ and just fantastic battery. Again, I wouldn't use this so much for Spotify just because of that older processor, but I don't really use Spotify most of the time apart from some discovery. And because of that, and the battery life this is just my main player. The other player to recommend, I don't have it here to show you, but there is also Hibi's M300. It's an Android-based audio player. Basically uses the same processor that you get here in the Shanling. It doesn't have system-wide EQ, which is a bit of a bummer. It only has 103 milliwatts of output power. But again, 12.5 milliwatts is fine. So 103, I'm actually perfectly happy. It does everything I need it to. Battery life on the M300 is better than the Shanling. This is, again, about 14 hours. The M300 gets about 20 hours of battery life. Same processor, and the price on the Hibi M300 is $160. Also, you can customize it however you want, which again, unfortunately, is not the situation here with the Shanling. I feel like I've probably talked enough about the Shanling M3 Plus, so we're going to give it a score, and probably not too big of a surprise, just 2 stars out of 5. I would still take this over most non-Android based audio players because I can install Power Amp. I can use that. That is a better interface for my music than most audio players. But there's just a bunch of other annoyances with this. Like, there's no reason I would personally pick this over the much cheaper Hibi M300 or these other devices that I showed you. I don't know. I feel like it's just not really very competitive in the Android space in 2025. But if you want to check it out for yourself, of course, I will have it linked in the description down below. And while you're down there, if you haven't yet, please do hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell, join me on Discord, and I'll catch you on the next super review. Cheers.
Join with the force of reviews. We now have the tools to brave the misleading world of audio fools. Hey, this review is super, and so are you. Grab your headphones, sniff a graph, and share your thoughts in this pursuit.